Whether it was your wedding or a wedding you attended, what is the worst behavior you've seen from a wedding guest? Story 1. I remember my friend Jake's wedding like it was yesterday. It was one of those picturesque autumn days where the leaves were just starting to turn, and there was a crispness in the air that made everything feel fresh and new. Jake and his bride, Emily, had planned every detail to perfection. The ceremony went off without a hitch, and we all headed to the reception hall with high spirits. That's when Uncle Bob decided to make his entrance. Uncle Bob was known for his party antics, but no one expected what was about to happen. As the evening progressed, the drinks flowed, and Uncle Bob got more and more animated. He started by hitting the dance floor with moves that seemed to defy both rhythm and logic. It was funny at first, but then he grabbed the mic during the best man's speech. "I just want to say," he slurred, swaying slightly, "that Jake here is one lucky son of a gun. And Emily, well, she's something else, ain't she?" He winked, and the room went silent. "Let's give him a toast," he shouted, raising his glass high and spilling half of it in the process. The toasts were supposed to be heartfelt and touching, not a drunken spectacle. Emily's parents were mortified. They tried to politely steer Uncle Bob off the stage, but he was determined. He started telling embarrassing stories from Jake's childhood, completely ignoring the cues to wrap it up. Finally, Jake himself had to step in, taking the mic and gently guiding Uncle Bob back to his seat. The rest of the night had an awkward tension that no one could quite shake. Story 2. So I was at my cousin Sarah's wedding, right? It was supposed to be this elegant affair in a swanky downtown hotel. Everyone dressed to the nines, the kind of event you see in movies. Everything was perfect until the reception. Sarah's old college friend, Denise, was there. Denise was known for being a bit wild, but nobody expected her to bring the chaos she did. As soon as the DJ started playing music, Denise hit the dance floor hard. I mean, she was out there doing some kind of mix between breakdancing and interpretive dance. It was bizarre, but kind of entertaining. Then came the bouquet toss. Denise elbowed her way to the front, determined to catch that bouquet. When Sarah tossed it, Denise lunged like she was going for a football pass, knocking over an elderly aunt and a flower girl in the process. She came up victorious, clutching the bouquet and doing a victory dance that included some moves not suitable for any family event. The worst part was the garter toss. Denise, not content with her bouquet win, practically tackled the poor guy who caught the garter, demanding he put it on her right there in the middle of the dance floor. The guy was so embarrassed, and Sarah was fuming. Eventually, security had to escort Denise out because she refused to calm down. Story 3. Weddings are supposed to be joyous occasions, but my sister's wedding had a moment that still makes me cringe. Everything started beautifully. Lovely ceremony, touching vows, the whole shebang. Then we got to the reception. My sister's friend, Laura, was a bit of a free spirit. She showed up wearing what looked more like a beach cover-up than a dress, which raised a few eyebrows, but didn't cause any immediate issues. The trouble began when she hit the open bar. Laura decided it would be a great idea to make a toast. She climbed up on her chair, drink in hand, and clinked her glass to get everyone's attention. "To the happy couple," she began, and everyone cheered. But then she kept going. "And to all the sexy people here tonight, let's get this party started." She proceeded to chug her drink, and then started taking shots with random guests. Before long, Laura was stumbling around, making inappropriate comments and trying to dance with every guy she saw. The final straw was when she tried to do a striptease on the dance floor. The DJ cut the music, and my dad had to step in and help Laura off the floor. My sister was in tears, embarrassed that her big day had turned into such a spectacle. Laura was escorted out, still laughing and completely oblivious to the chaos she had caused. Story 4. My buddy Tim's wedding was one for the books, mostly because of one guest, his cousin Mark. Now, Mark is one of those guys who thinks he's the life of the party, but really he's just a mess. The ceremony was lovely, held in a charming little chapel. We all made our way to the reception, which was set up in this beautiful garden. Everything was picture perfect until Mark got into the tequila. He started by loudly critiquing the food. "This chicken is drier than my ex-wife," he announced to the entire table, laughing at his own joke. Then he moved on to the dance floor, where he tried to start a conga line during the father-daughter dance. But the real show began during the speeches. Mark decided he needed to add his 2 cents. He grabbed the mic after the best man and began a rambling, incoherent speech about love, life, and his own failed marriages. "Tim, you're a brave man," he slurred, "because marriage is like a roller coaster. Sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down, and sometimes you just want to puke." People started to shift uncomfortably, and Tim's new bride, Jane, looked like she was ready to explode. Eventually, Tim had to take the mic away and apologize for Mark's behavior. Mark, undeterred, continued to drink and ended the night by passing out on a table, snoring loudly. Story 5. I'll never forget my sister Amanda's wedding. It was a small, intimate gathering at our family's lake house. Everything was going smoothly until her ex-boyfriend Dan showed up uninvited. Dan had always been a bit of a loose cannon, but no one expected him to crash the wedding. He showed up halfway through the reception, clearly intoxicated. "Amanda!" he shouted as he stumbled across the lawn. Amanda, you can't marry him! Everyone froze. Amanda's new husband, Greg, looked ready to deck the guy. But Amanda, ever the peacemaker, tried to handle it calmly. Dan, you need to leave, she said firmly. But Dan wasn't having it. He kept ranting about how he and Amanda were meant to be together and how Greg was all wrong for her. You're making a huge mistake, he yelled. My Uncle Joe, a big burly guy, finally stepped in and physically escorted Dan off the property. The whole scene was incredibly tense, and it cast a shadow over the rest of the evening. Amanda was shaken, and Greg was furious. The worst part was that Dan didn't leave quietly. As he was being driven away, he kept shouting out the window, making a scene all the way down the driveway. It took a while for everyone to calm down and try to salvage what was left of the celebration. Story 6. I was at my cousin Leo's wedding, which was supposed to be a fun, laid-back affair on a beach in Florida. Leo and his bride, Jenna, had planned everything perfectly. The ceremony at sunset, a seafood buffet, and even a bonfire for later in the evening. It was set to be a beautiful night. Then Aunt Linda happened. Aunt Linda is the kind of person who likes to be the center of attention, and she doesn't care how she gets there. She showed up wearing a dress that could only be described as a prom dress from the 80s, neon pink, sequins, and all. But it wasn't her outfit that caused the chaos. As the sun began to set and Leo and Jenna were exchanging vows, Aunt Linda decided she needed a closer look. She stood up from her seat and, without any subtlety, walked right up to the altar, her heels sinking into the sand with every step. I need to get this on video, she declared, pulling out her phone and getting right in the officiant's face. Leo shot her a look that could kill, but Aunt Linda was oblivious. She kept filming, moving around to get different angles, even stepping in front of the photographer. Finally, Jenna's mom, who had been watching in horror, stepped in and quietly but firmly escorted Aunt Linda back to her seat. We all thought that would be the end of it, but Aunt Linda wasn't done. At the reception, she got into the sangria. A lot of it. She took over the DJ's mic during the toasts. I just want to say, she slurred, that Leo and Jenna are the perfect couple. And Leo, you were always my favorite nephew, she went on and on, sharing embarrassing stories from Leo's childhood, while everyone else shifted uncomfortably in their seats. When Jenna's brother tried to gently take the mic from her, Aunt Linda threw a fit, swatting at him and shrieking about how she was just trying to show her love. Eventually, security had to step in and escort her out. The rest of the night was tense, with everyone trying to forget the spectacle. Story 7. My friend Molly's wedding was a real fairy tale, at least until her cousin Jimmy got involved. The ceremony was held in a beautiful garden, and the reception was in a stunning glass-walled hall overlooking a lake. Everything was perfect. Jimmy, who had a bit of a reputation for being a prankster, was supposed to be on his best behavior. For a while, he was. He laughed, danced, and even made a respectable toast. But as the night wore on, the pranks started. It began innocently enough, with Jimmy sneaking funny hats onto unsuspecting guests. People laughed, took pictures. It was harmless fun. But then Jimmy decided to kick it up a notch. He found a way to get behind the DJ booth and switch the couple's first dance song with Who Let the Dogs Out. Everyone was shocked when the song blared out, but Molly and her new husband Tom laughed it off and continued dancing. However, Jimmy didn't stop there. During the cake cutting, he snuck up and smashed a handful of cake into Tom's face, causing a commotion. Tom tried to laugh it off, but you could see he was annoyed. Molly, on the other hand, was visibly upset, her dream wedding slowly turning into a circus. The final straw came during the bouquet toss. Jimmy thought it would be hilarious to join the single ladies. When Molly tossed the bouquet, Jimmy leaped up, knocking over several guests to grab it. He paraded around with the bouquet, making a mockery of the whole tradition. Molly's face turned red with anger, and Tom had to step in and tell Jimmy to knock it off. By the end of the night, Jimmy was sulking in a corner, and the rest of us were trying to salvage the good vibes of the evening. Molly and Tom were good sports, but you could tell they were disappointed that their special day had been marred by Jimmy's antics. Story 8. I'll never forget my buddy Mike's wedding because of one guest who managed to turn a joyous occasion into a tense nightmare. Mike married his high school sweetheart, Anna, in a picturesque countryside venue. Everything was going well until Mike's old college roommate, Rob, showed up. Rob was notorious for his temper, but Mike had hoped he'd keep it in check. During the ceremony, Rob seemed fine, sitting quietly and even tearing up a bit. But the reception was a different story. Rob started drinking heavily and quickly became belligerent. It started with him loudly criticizing the food. "This steak is tougher than my ex-girlfriend," he shouted, drawing stares from everyone around him. Mike and Anna tried to laugh it off, but the tension was building. Then, Rob decided to take over the dance floor. The DJ was playing a slow song for the couples when Rob stormed in and started dancing erratically, bumping into people and causing a scene. "Get off the floor, Rob!" someone shouted, but he ignored them. Finally, Mike had to step in, pulling Rob aside and telling him to calm down. Rob did settle for a bit, but not for long. During the best man's speech, Rob heckled him, shouting, You call that a speech? I could do better drunk. The best man, visibly upset, cut his speech short, and the mood of the reception took a nosedive. The worst part was yet to come. As the night went on, Rob got into an argument with another guest. Voices were raised, and suddenly, punches were thrown. Chaos erupted as people tried to break up the fight. In the end, security had to drag Rob out, kicking and screaming. Mike and Anna were devastated. Their perfect day had been overshadowed by Rob's outburst. It took a long time for everyone to calm down and try to enjoy what was left of the evening. Story 9. My sister Katie's wedding was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. She married her college sweetheart, Jeff, in a charming little chapel. The ceremony was perfect, and we all moved to the reception hall, ready to celebrate. Jeff's cousin Eric was there. Eric had a bit of a reputation for being a troublemaker, but no one expected what he did that night. Everything was going smoothly until the speeches started. Eric grabbed the mic after the maid of honor, swaying slightly. I just want to say, he began, his voice slurred, that Jeff and Katie are the best, even though Jeff is a lousy poker player. Everyone chuckled awkwardly, but Eric wasn't done. He started telling inappropriate jokes, ignoring the looks of horror from Katie and Jeff. Remember that time in Vegas, Jeff? Eric continued, launching into a story that definitely wasn't wedding appropriate. Katie's parents were fuming. They tried to cut him off, but Eric brushed them aside. Finally, Jeff had to physically take the mic from him, apologizing to the guests. But Eric didn't stop. He kept drinking and eventually made his way to the dance floor, where he began to harass the bridesmaids. Hey, beautiful, he slurred at one of them, grabbing her arm. She pulled away, clearly uncomfortable. Jeff stepped in again, telling Eric to back off. Things escalated quickly, and soon enough, Eric threw a punch at Jeff. The reception turned into chaos as people tried to separate them. Security had to step in and drag Eric out. Katie was in tears, her perfect day ruined by one out-of-control guest. Jeff was livid, and it took a long time for everyone to settle down. Story 10. I was at my friend Sarah's wedding, which was a beautiful event in a rustic barn venue. Everything was perfect until her ex-boyfriend Brian showed up. Brian wasn't invited, but that didn't stop him from crashing the wedding. The ceremony had just ended, and we were all mingling and enjoying cocktails when Brian stumbled in. He was clearly drunk and making a beeline for Sarah. Sarah, he shouted, drawing everyone's attention. You can't marry him! You belong with me! Sarah looked mortified. Her new husband, Dave, tried to approach Brian calmly. You need to leave, Brian, he said, but Brian wasn't having it. He kept shouting about how Sarah was making a huge mistake, causing a scene. Things got worse when Brian tried to grab Sarah's arm. Dave stepped in, pushing Brian away, and a scuffle broke out. Guests were gasping, trying to pull them apart. Finally, the groomsmen managed to drag Brian outside and called the police. Sarah was in tears, and Dave was furious. The mood was completely ruined, and it took a while for everyone to calm down and try to enjoy the rest of the evening. Brian was arrested, and Sarah and Dave had to make the best of a very disrupted day. Story 11. I was at my cousin Jessie's wedding, a charming backyard affair at her parents' house. The setting was perfect. Fairy lights strung up in the trees, a beautiful arch for the ceremony, and a quaint little dance floor on the patio. The whole thing felt like a scene from a movie. Then there was Uncle Gary. Now, Uncle Gary is known for his wild stories and love of a good drink, but we didn't expect him to go as far as he did that day. Everything started out fine. Uncle Gary was in good spirits, cracking jokes and mingling with the guests. But as the reception went on, he drank more and more. During the speeches, Uncle Gary decided he needed to add his own commentary. Jessie, he slurred, standing up and swaying slightly. You've always been my favorite niece, and now you're marrying this guy. He pointed at Jessie's new husband, Mark, who looked incredibly uncomfortable. The maid of honor tried to continue her speech, but Uncle Gary wasn't done. Remember that time we went camping and you fell in the lake? He continued, oblivious to the awkward silence. Good times, good times. He laughed loudly, but no one else joined in. Jessie, trying to salvage the moment, gently asked Uncle Gary to sit down, but instead, he stumbled onto the dance floor where he attempted to start a conga line. He grabbed guests by the hand, pulling them into a disorganized, drunken parade. It was a mess. The final straw came when he knocked over the dessert table, sending cupcakes and cookies flying. Jessie's mom was livid, and Uncle Gary was escorted out by Jessie's brother. The rest of the night was spent cleaning up the mess and trying to get back to the celebration, but the mood had definitely shifted. Story 12. I'll never forget my friend Matt's wedding. Matt and his fiancée, Emily, decided on a small, intimate ceremony at a vineyard. It was a stunning venue, with rows of grapevines, a picturesque barn, and an elegant reception area. Everything was perfect until Emily's cousin Rachel got involved. Rachel showed up late, making a grand entrance during the middle of the vow. She was dressed in a flashy, sequined dress that seemed more appropriate for a nightclub than a wedding. As she walked down the aisle, she loudly apologized, drawing everyone's attention. Sorry, sorry, Rachel called out, waving and laughing. Traffic was terrible. Emily's face was a mix of shock and anger, but she kept her composure. The ceremony continued, but Rachel wasn't done causing disruptions. At the reception, Rachel hit the open bar hard. She started flirting with every guy there, including the groom's father. She made loud, inappropriate jokes and kept trying to get people to join her on the dance floor for impromptu dance-offs. Most people tried to ignore her, but it was impossible not to notice the spectacle she was making. Things took a turn for the worse when it was time for the bouquet toss. Rachel pushed her way to the front, elbowing other guests out of the way. When Emily tossed the bouquet, Rachel leaped up, snatching it out of the air and then parading around, shouting, "I'm next! I'm next!" Emily was visibly upset, and Matt tried to calm her down, but Rachel's antics continued. She attempted to give an impromptu speech, grabbing the microphone from the DJ. "Emily and Matt," she slurred, "you're so lucky to have found each other. And I'm lucky to have found the bar." She laughed at her own joke, but no one else did. Eventually, Rachel was asked to leave. Security escorted her out, and the rest of the night was spent trying to bring back the joyous atmosphere. But the damage was done, and it was clear that Rachel had left a lasting impression on everyone there. Story 13. My buddy Tom's wedding was an elegant affair at a historic mansion. The ceremony was held in the garden, and the reception took place inside, with chandeliers and classic decor adding to the sophisticated atmosphere. Everything was going smoothly until Tom's college friend Dave decided to make things interesting. Dave was known for his wild partying, but Tom hoped he'd behave. At first, Dave was on his best behavior, mingling and making polite conversation, but after a few too many trips to the open bar, things took a turn. During the father-daughter dance, Dave thought it would be funny to join in. He staggered onto the dance floor, trying to cut in with the bride. "Come on, let me show you how it's done," he yelled, reaching for her hand. Tom's father-in-law was not amused and quickly ushered Dave off the floor. Undeterred, Dave found a new way to be the center of attention. He climbed onto one of the tables, grabbing a bottle of champagne. "To Tom and his lovely bride," he shouted, popping the cork and spraying champagne everywhere. Guests gasped and tried to shield themselves from the spray. Tom's new wife, Sarah, was furious. She marched over and demanded that Dave get down. "You're ruining our wedding," she yelled. But Dave just laughed and continued to make a spectacle of himself. Eventually, security had to intervene. They escorted Dave out, but not before he managed to knock over a centerpiece, sending flowers and candles crashing to the floor. The rest of the night, everyone tried to forget the chaos Dave had caused, but it was hard to ignore the mess he left behind. Story 14. I'll never forget my sister Amanda's wedding. She married her high school sweetheart Ben in a beautiful outdoor ceremony at a local park. The reception was set up under a big white tent, with fairy lights and a dance floor. Everything was perfect until Ben's old friend Jake showed up. Jake had always been a bit of a wild card, but Ben hadn't seen him in years and thought it would be nice to invite. At first, Jake seemed fine, chatting with guests and catching up with old friends. But as the night went on, Jake's behavior got more and more erratic. During the speeches, Jake decided he needed to add his own. He grabbed the microphone after the best man, slurring his words. "I've known Ben for a long time," he began. "And let me tell you, he's a wild one." He went on to share embarrassing stories from their past, much to Ben's dismay. Amanda tried to laugh it off, but it was clear she was upset. Jake didn't stop there. He hit the dance floor, grabbing random guests and trying to start a dance-off. He was so drunk that he kept stumbling and nearly knocked over the wedding cake. The final straw came when Jake tried to join in on the first dance. Ben and Amanda were having their moment when Jake stumbled onto the dance floor, shouting, "Let me cut in!" Ben had to physically push him away, and security was called to escort him out. Amanda was in tears, and Ben was furious. The rest of the night was spent trying to salvage the celebration, but Jake's antics had cast a shadow over what should have been a perfect day. Story 15. One of the most memorable weddings I attended was my friend Laura. She had planned a beautiful winter wedding in a charming lodge up in the mountains. The ceremony was cozy and intimate, with a roaring fireplace and a snow-covered landscape outside. Everything was perfect until Laura's cousin, Ethan, decided to make his presence known. Ethan had a bit of a reputation for being a troublemaker, but no one expected him to show up in a full Santa Claus costume. "Ho, ho, ho!" he bellowed as he entered the reception hall, ringing a bell and handing out candy canes. Everyone was confused, but some guests laughed, thinking it was a joke. Laura, however, was not amused. She had carefully planned every detail of her wedding, and Ethan's antics were not part of the plan. She tried to keep her cool, but you could see the frustration on her face. Ethan didn't stop there. He proceeded to get drunk and loudly criticize everything from the food to the music. "This DJ sucks," he shouted at one point, stumbling over to the DJ booth and trying to take over. The DJ managed to fend him off, but the damage was done. The worst part was when Ethan decided to give an impromptu speech. "Laura," he slurred, "you're my favorite cousin, and I just want to say, Santa approves of this wedding." He laughed loudly, but no one else did. Laura's husband, Mike, finally had enough. He approached Ethan and told him to leave. Ethan refused, so Mike had to call security. As Ethan was being escorted out, he shouted, "Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night." The rest of the evening was spent trying to forget Ethan's antics, but it was hard to ignore the chaos he had caused. Laura was visibly upset, and Mike was fuming. What should have been a magical night had been marred by one guest's terrible behavior. Story 16. My friend Jenny's wedding was the kind of event you dream about. A charming vineyard, perfect weather, and every detail meticulously planned. It all went off without a hitch until her husband's college buddy, Steve, decided to take things up a notch. Steve was known for his partying ways, but we all thought he'd managed to keep it together for one night. He started the evening well enough, chatting with guests and enjoying the festivities. But as the night progressed, the open bar became his playground. During the father-daughter dance, Steve decided it was time for some action. He jumped onto the dance floor with a beer in hand and started breakdancing. It was funny at first, but then he accidentally kicked over the photographer's tripod, sending the camera crashing to the ground. Jenny's dad was furious, and the photographer looked ready to cry. As if that wasn't enough, Steve decided he needed to give a speech. He grabbed the mic from the DJ and slurred, "Jenny, you're great, but Tom, man, remember that time in Cabo?" He went on to tell a story that was wildly inappropriate, involving a drunken escapade from their college day. Tom's face was redder than a tomato, and Jenny looked like she was about to explode. Security finally had to intervene when Steve tried to take over the DJ booth, insisting he had a better playlist. He was escorted out, still shouting about how he was just trying to have fun. The rest of the night, everyone tried to recover from the chaos, but Steve's antics had already cast a shadow over the celebration. Story 17. My cousin Rachel's wedding was held at a beautiful lakeside resort. Everything was perfect: the serene water, the lush greenery, the tasteful decoration. Rachel and her fiancé, Matt, had gone all out to make sure their big day was unforgettable. And it was, thanks to Matt's uncle, Bill. Uncle Bill was known for his conspiracy theories and eccentric behavior, but no one thought he'd bring that to the wedding. During the ceremony, he sat quietly, but things changed at the reception. After a few drinks, Uncle Bill started talking about the truth behind wedding. "You know," he said loudly to anyone who'd listen, "marriage is just a construct of the government to control us." Most people tried to ignore him, but he wasn't done. He grabbed a fork and started tapping his glass to get everyone's attention. "Listen up," he shouted. "I have a few things to say." He then launched into a bizarre rant about how the wedding industry was a scam and how Rachel and Matt were just pawns in a larger conspiracy. Rachel's face turned pale, and Matt's mom looked like she was ready to faint. The final straw came when Uncle Bill decided to toast the couple. "Here's to Rachel and Matt," he said, holding up his glass. "May you wake up and see the truth before it's too late." The awkward silence that followed was deafening. Rachel's dad had to step in and gently guide Uncle Bill back to his seat, but the damage was done. The mood was thoroughly ruined, and everyone spent the rest of the night trying to steer clear of Uncle Bill. Story 18. My buddy Chris's wedding was a grand affair held at a fancy hotel downtown. Everything was elegant and sophisticated, from the decor to the live band playing jazz standards. The ceremony was beautiful, and the reception was in full swing when Chris's coworker, Larry, decided to make his move. Larry was known in the office for being a bit of a flirt, but no one expected him to be so brazen. He started the evening charming enough, chatting with various guests, but after a few too many drinks, he set his sights on the bridesmaids. He began by making overly friendly comments and trying to dance with every bridesmaid in sight. "Hey, beautiful," he said to one, wrapping his arm around her waist. "Want to dance?" The bridesmaid, clearly uncomfortable, tried to politely decline, but Larry wasn't having it. Things escalated when Larry decided to join the bouquet toss. He pushed his way to the front, elbowing out the women, and when the bouquet was thrown, he jumped up and caught it, much to everyone's shock. "Looks like I'm next," he shouted, waving the bouquet in the air. Chris and his bride, Megan, were furious. Megan approached Larry and told him to leave, but Larry just laughed it off. "Come on, it's all in good fun," he said. But it was clear no one else found it funny. Security had to step in and escort Larry out. The rest of the night, the guests tried to shake off the uncomfortable incident, but Larry's behavior had left a bad taste. Chris and Megan did their best to enjoy their special day, but it was clear that Larry's antics had cast a shadow over the celebration. Story 19. My sister Emily's wedding was held in a charming old church, followed by a reception in a beautifully restored barn. It was the kind of picturesque event that seemed straight out of a wedding magazine. Everything was going smoothly until Emily's old high school friend Denise decided to make things interesting. Denise showed up late, already looking a bit tipsy. She stumbled into the reception hall and immediately started making a scene. "Emily!" she shouted, her voice carrying across the room. "I'm here! The party can start now!" Emily and her new husband Jack exchanged worried glances but tried to brush it off. Denise, however, wasn't done. She hit the open bar hard and quickly became the center of attention for all the wrong reasons. During the dinner, Denise decided she needed to give a speech. She grabbed the microphone from the DJ and slurred, "Emily, you're like my best friend ever. Remember that time in high school when we skipped class and went to the beach? Good times." She went on to share more embarrassing stories, completely ignoring the uncomfortable looks from the guests. Jack's parents looked horrified, and Emily was on the verge of tears. When Denise started to sing, badly, Jack had to step in and gently take the mic from her. "Thanks, Denise," he said, trying to keep things light. "I think it's time to let the DJ take over." But Denise wasn't done causing trouble. She started hitting on Jack's groomsmen, making lewd comments and trying to dance provocatively with them. One of the groomsmen, clearly uncomfortable, had to push her away. The final straw came when Denise knocked over a table of desserts, sending cakes and pastries flying. Emily was devastated, and Denise was finally escorted out by a couple of the brides. The rest of the night, everyone tried to salvage the celebration. But Denise's antics had left a dark cloud over what should have been a perfect day. Story 20. I'll never forget my cousin Laura's wedding. She married her longtime boyfriend, Jake, in a beautiful garden ceremony. The reception was held in a large tent decorated with fairy lights and flowers. It was a magical setting, but things took a turn thanks to Jake's childhood friend Mike. Mike was always a bit of a jokester, but no one expected him to go so far. He started by making loud, inappropriate jokes during the ceremony, drawing annoyed glances from other guests. "Hey, Jake, don't trip on your way down the aisle," he shouted, causing a few nervous chuckles. At the reception, Mike hit the bar and quickly became the loudest person in the room. He tried to start a drinking game during the best man's speech, shouting out, "Drink every time he says love." People tried to ignore him, but it was hard. The worst part came during the garter toss. Mike pushed his way to the front, and when Jake tossed the garter, Mike caught it and immediately put it on his head like a crown. "I'm the king," he shouted, prancing around and making a spectacle of himself. Laura and Jake were visibly upset, but Mike wasn't done. He grabbed the mic from the DJ and started singing karaoke, despite the fact that there was no karaoke setup. "Let's get this party started," he yelled, launching into an off-key rendition of a popular song. Security had to step in when Mike tried to climb onto one of the tables. He was escorted out, still singing and laughing. The mood of the reception was completely ruined, and everyone spent the rest of the night trying to recover from the chaos Mike had caused. Laura and Jake did their best to enjoy their special day, but it was clear that Mike's antics had cast a shadow over the celebration. Story 21. I was at my friend Dave's wedding, which took place in a beautiful botanical garden. The ceremony was lovely, and the reception was set up in an elegant glass pavilion. Everything was perfect until Dave's cousin, Lenny, decided to turn the night into his personal stand-up comedy show. Lenny, known for his off-color humor, started the evening well enough, mingling with guests and enjoying the open bar. But as the night progressed, the drink started to loosen his tongue. During the best man's speech, Lenny loudly interrupted with inappropriate jokes, causing the best man to stumble and lose his train of thought. "Why don't you just marry the guy already?" Lenny shouted, drawing awkward laughs and uncomfortable glances. Dave shot him a look, but Lenny was oblivious. He continued to heckle, making everyone tense. The real disaster came during the toasts. Lenny grabbed the microphone, slurring, "I just want to say, Dave, you're a lucky guy. And Emily, you're hot." He laughed loudly, but no one else did. "Remember that time in Vegas?" he continued, sharing an inappropriate story that made Emily's parents go pale. Emily looked like she was about to cry, and Dave was fuming. Finally, Emily's brother had to step in, gently taking the microphone from Lenny and asking him to sit down. But Lenny wasn't done causing trouble. He stumbled to the dance floor, trying to start a conga line during the father-daughter dance. Security had to be called when Lenny tried to climb onto a table to do a striptease. He was escorted out, still laughing and shouting about how everyone needed to lighten up. The rest of the night, everyone tried to forget Lenny's antics, but the damage was done. Dave and Emily did their best to enjoy their night, but it was clear that Lenny's behavior had cast a shadow over their special day. Story 22. I'll never forget my sister Maggie's wedding. It was a gorgeous ceremony at a beachfront hotel, with the reception held in a stunning ballroom overlooking the ocean. Everything was perfect until Maggie's old friend Tara decided to make a scene. Tara showed up late, stumbling into the reception halfway through the dinner. She was clearly intoxicated and wearing a dress that looked more appropriate for a nightclub than a wedding. "Maggie!" she shouted as she entered, drawing everyone's attention. "I'm here! Let's party!" Maggie and her new husband Ben tried to ignore her, but Tara wasn't done. She hit the open bar hard, downing drinks at an alarming rate. During the toasts, Tara decided she needed to add her own speech. She grabbed the microphone and slurred, "Maggie, you're like my best friend ever. Remember that time we got arrested? Good times." Ben's parents looked horrified, and Maggie was on the verge of tears. When Tara started making lewd jokes, Ben had to step in and take the microphone away. "Thanks, Tara," he said, trying to keep things light. "But I think it's time to let the DJ take over." Tara wasn't done causing trouble. She started hitting on the groomsmen, making inappropriate comments and trying to dance provocatively with them. One of the groomsmen, clearly uncomfortable, had to push her away. The final straw came when Tara knocked over the wedding cake, sending it crashing to the floor. Maggie was devastated, and Tara was finally escorted out by security. The rest of the night, everyone tried to salvage the celebration, but Tara's antics had left a dark cloud over what should have been a perfect day. Story 23. My friend Kevin's wedding was held at a charming countryside inn. The ceremony was lovely, and the reception was set up in a picturesque barn. Everything was going smoothly until Kevin's co-worker, John, decided to make his presence known. John had a reputation for being a bit of a wild card, but Kevin hadn't expected him to cause any trouble. At first, John seemed fine, chatting with guests and enjoying the festivities. But as the night wore on, he started drinking heavily and getting louder. During the best man's speech, John loudly interrupted with inappropriate comments. "Yeah, right," he shouted when the best man mentioned Kevin's loyalty. People laughed awkwardly, but Kevin shot him a warning look. John ignored it and kept making snide remarks. The real trouble started during the first dance. John, clearly drunk, stumbled onto the dance floor and tried to join in. "Let me cut in," he shouted, grabbing Kevin's arm. Kevin's new wife, Sarah, looked horrified. Kevin had to physically push John away, and security was called to escort him out. John didn't go quietly. He shouted insults as he was dragged out, causing a scene that left everyone tense and uncomfortable. The rest of the night, the guests tried to shake off the incident, but John's behavior had already cast a shadow over the celebration. Story 24. My cousin Natalie's wedding was held at a beautiful vineyard. The ceremony was outdoors, and the reception was in a large, elegant tent. Everything was perfect until Natalie's college roommate, Lisa, decided to make things interesting. Lisa had always been a bit of a drama queen, but no one expected her to act out at the wedding. She showed up wearing a dress that was white and clearly meant to draw attention. During the ceremony, she kept whispering loudly to the person next to her, drawing annoyed glances from other guests. At the reception, Lisa hit the open bar and started drinking heavily. She began by making loud, inappropriate jokes and trying to dance with every guy there. "Hey, handsome," she said to one of the groomsmen, wrapping her arm around his neck. "Want to dance?" Things escalated when it was time for the bouquet toss. Lisa pushed her way to the front, elbowing other guests out of the way. When Natalie tossed the bouquet, Lisa leaped up, snatching it out of the air and then parading around, shouting, "I'm next, I'm next." Natalie was furious, but Lisa wasn't done. She grabbed the microphone from the DJ and started giving an impromptu speech. "Natalie and James," she slurred, "you guys are so lucky, and I'm lucky to have found the bar." She laughed at her own joke, but no one else did. Security had to step in and escort Lisa out when she started trying to climb onto one of the tables. The rest of the night, everyone tried to recover from the chaos, but Lisa's antics had already cast a shadow over the celebration. Story 25. My sister Claire's wedding was held at a beautiful estate, with the ceremony in a garden and the reception in a grand ballroom. Everything was perfect until Claire's ex-boyfriend, Paul, showed up uninvited. Paul had always been a bit of a troublemaker, but no one expected him to crash the wedding. He showed up halfway through the reception, clearly intoxicated. "Claire!" he shouted as he stumbled across the ballroom. "Claire, you can't marry him!" Everyone froze. Claire's new husband, Michael, tried to approach Paul calmly. "You need to leave, Paul," he said, but Paul wasn't having it. He kept shouting about how Claire was making a huge mistake, causing a scene. Things got worse when Paul tried to grab Claire's arm. Michael stepped in, pushing Paul away, and a scuffle broke out. Guests were gasping, trying to pull them apart. Finally, the groomsmen managed to drag Paul outside and called the police. Claire was in tears, and Michael was furious. The mood was completely ruined, and it took a while for everyone to calm down and try to enjoy the rest of the evening. Paul was arrested, and Claire and Michael had to make the best of a very disrupted day. Story 26. My buddy Matt's wedding was held at a luxurious golf club with rolling green hills and a stunning sunset view. Everything was meticulously planned, from the ceremony on the green to the elegant dinner in the clubhouse. But Matt's high school friend Derek turned it into a night to remember for all the wrong reasons. Derek had a reputation for being a party animal, but Matt hoped he would behave. Things started off fine. Derek was mingling and enjoying himself. But once he got a few drinks in him, his true colors started to show. During the best man's speech, Derek decided to add his own commentary loudly. "Hey, remember that time Matt streaked through the quad?" Derek shouted, slurring his words. People laughed nervously, but Matt's new wife, Lisa, was visibly uncomfortable. The best man tried to continue, but Derek kept interrupting with inappropriate comments. The real disaster came during the first dance. As Matt and Lisa took to the floor, Derek stumbled over and tried to cut in. "Come on, Lisa! Let's show them how it's done!" he yelled. Matt had to physically push him away, and security was called to escort Derek out. But Derek wasn't done causing chaos. As he was being let out, he grabbed a bottle of champagne from a nearby table and sprayed it everywhere, soaking several guests. The rest of the night was spent trying to salvage the celebration, but Derek's antics had already cast a shadow over what should have been a perfect evening. Story 27. My cousin Sarah's wedding was a beautiful, intimate affair, held at a charming bed and breakfast in the countryside. The ceremony was under a canopy of trees, and the reception was in a quaint, decorated barn. Everything was perfect until Sarah's childhood friend, Melanie, got involved. Melanie showed up late, already looking tipsy. She made a grand entrance, shouting, "The party's here!" and immediately hit the open bar. During the toasts, Melanie decided she needed to add her own speech, grabbing the microphone and slurring, "Sarah, you've always been like a sister to me. Remember that time we got so drunk we couldn't find our way home?" Sarah's parents were mortified, and Sarah was clearly upset. Melanie kept going, sharing embarrassing stories and making inappropriate jokes. Finally, Sarah's brother had to take the mic away, gently telling Melanie to sit down. Things escalated when Melanie hit the dance floor. She tried to dance with every guy there, making lewd comments and causing several awkward scenes. The final straw came when she knocked over the wedding cake while attempting a drunken dance move. Sarah was in tears, and Melanie was finally escorted out by a couple of the bridesmaids. The rest of the night was spent trying to recover from the chaos, but Melanie's behavior had already left a lasting impression on everyone there. Story 28. My sister Beth's wedding was held at a beautiful, historic mansion. The ceremony was in the garden, and the reception was in a grand hall with crystal chandeliers and elegant decoration. Everything was perfect until Beth's old college friend, Tony, decided to turn the night into a comedy show. Tony was known for his inappropriate humor, but we all hoped he'd behave. During the ceremony, he made loud comments that drew annoyed glances from other guests. "Is this thing over yet?" he whispered, but loud enough for several people to hear. At the reception, Tony hit the bar hard and quickly became the loudest person in the room. He decided to give an impromptu toast, grabbing the microphone and slurring, "Beth, you're great, but remember that time you got so drunk you fell in the pool?" Beth's face turned red with embarrassment, and her new husband, Jake, was fuming. Tony went on to tell more inappropriate stories, ignoring the uncomfortable silence. Finally, Jake had to take the mic away and ask Tony to sit down. The real disaster came during the bouquet toss. Tony decided it would be funny to push his way to the front and try to catch the bouquet. He knocked over several guests, causing a commotion and nearly ruining the moment. Security had to escort Tony out, and the rest of the night was spent trying to salvage the celebration. Story 29. My friend Katie's wedding was held at a beautiful lakeside lodge. The ceremony was on the shore, and the reception was in a rustic yet elegant hall. Everything was perfect until Katie's cousin, Brenda, decided to make a scene. Brenda showed up late, stumbling into the ceremony halfway through the vows. She loudly apologized, drawing everyone's attention. Sorry, she said, laughing. "Traffic was a nightmare." At the reception, Brenda hit the open bar hard. She started making loud, inappropriate jokes and trying to dance with every guy there. "Hey, handsome," she said to one of the groomsmen, wrapping her arm around his neck. "Want to dance?" Things got worse when it was time for the toasts. Brenda decided she needed to add her own speech, grabbing the microphone and slurring, "Katie, you're like my best friend ever. Remember that time we got so drunk we couldn't find our way home?" Katie was visibly upset, and her new husband, Tom, was fuming. Brenda kept going, sharing more embarrassing stories and making lewd comments. Finally, Tom had to take the mic away and ask Brenda to sit down. The final straw came when Brenda knocked over a table of desserts, sending cakes and pastries flying. Katie was in tears, and Brenda was finally escorted out by a couple of the groomsmen. The rest of the night, everyone tried to recover from the chaos, but Brenda's antics had already cast a shadow over what should have been a perfect day. Story 30. I'll never forget my brother Mark's wedding. It was a gorgeous affair held at a vineyard, with the ceremony in a field of grapevines and the reception in a rustic barn. Everything was perfect until Mark's coworker, Steve, decided to make things interesting. Steve was known for his wild partying, but no one expected him to go so far. He started by making loud, inappropriate jokes during the ceremony, drawing annoyed glances from other guests. "Hey, Mark, don't trip on your way down the aisle," he shouted, causing a few nervous chuckles. At the reception, Steve hit the bar and quickly became the loudest person in the room. He tried to start a drinking game during the best man's speech, shouting, "Drink every time he says love." People tried to ignore him, but it was hard. The worst part came during the first dance. Steve pushed his way to the front and tried to join in. "Let me cut in," he shouted, grabbing Mark's arm. Mark's new wife, Lisa, looked horrified. Mark had to physically push Steve away, and security was called to escort him out. But Steve wasn't done causing trouble. As he was being led out, he grabbed a bottle of champagne from a nearby table and sprayed it everywhere, soaking several guests. The rest of the night was spent trying to salvage the celebration, but Steve's antics had already cast a shadow over what should have been a perfect evening. Story 31. My best friend Lily's wedding was set in a stunning cliffside venue overlooking the ocean. Everything was planned down to the last detail, from the exquisite floral arrangements to the gourmet menu. But her older brother, Jack, turned what should have been a perfect day into a memorable disaster. Jack had always been a bit of a wild card, but Lily hoped he'd keep his behavior in check. The ceremony went off without a hitch, and the reception started beautifully. However, as the night progressed, Jack drank more and more, becoming increasingly loud and boisterous. During the toasts, Jack decided it was his time to shine. He grabbed the microphone and began, "Lily, you're the best sister anyone could ask for. Remember that time you got grounded for sneaking out to meet that guy?" He laughed, but no one else did. Lily's face turned bright red, and her husband, Paul, looked uncomfortable. Jack continued, oblivious to the growing tension. "And Paul, you better take good care of her, or you'll have to deal with me," he said, slurring his words. The toast went on way too long, filled with more embarrassing anecdotes and inappropriate jokes. Eventually, Lily's father had to step in and take the microphone away, gently guiding Jack back to his seat. But Jack wasn't done. He hit the dance floor and tried to start a limbo contest using a piece of the tent's support pole. He ended up knocking over several decorations and almost taking down the entire tent. Security had to escort him out, and the rest of the night, everyone tried to forget Jack's antics. Story 32. My cousin Michelle's wedding was held at a beautiful old manor house with sprawling gardens and elegant decor. Everything seemed perfect, from the ceremony under a flower-draped arbor to the reception in a grand ballroom. That is, until Michelle's college friend, Tina, showed up and turned the event into a circus. Tina arrived late, loudly apologizing and drawing attention to herself. She was already tipsy and continued to drink heavily throughout the evening. During the dinner, she made loud, inappropriate jokes and tried to flirt with the groomsmen. When it came time for the speeches, Tina decided she needed to add her own. She grabbed the microphone and slurred, "Michelle, you're my best friend, and I just want to say how lucky you are to have found Tom." She then launched into a series of embarrassing stories from their college days, much to Michelle's horror. Michelle's parents were mortified, and Tom's family looked shocked. Finally, Tom took the microphone away from Tina and gently asked her to sit down. But Tina wasn't done causing trouble. She stumbled onto the dance floor and tried to dance with every guy there, making lewd comments and causing several awkward scenes. The final straw came when Tina knocked over the wedding cake while attempting a drunken dance move. Michelle was in tears, and Tina was finally escorted out by a couple of groomsmen. The rest of the night, everyone tried to recover from the chaos, but Tina's behavior had already left a lasting impression on everyone there. Story 33. My friend Jesse's wedding was held in a picturesque barn with twinkling fairy lights and rustic decorations. It was a beautiful day, and everything was going perfectly until Jesse's cousin Ryan decided to turn it into a debacle. Ryan had a history of being a bit of a troublemaker, but no one expected him to act out at the wedding. During the ceremony, he made loud comments that drew annoyed glances from other guests. "Are we done yet?" he muttered, but loud enough for several people to hear. At the reception, Ryan hit the bar hard and quickly became the loudest person in the room. He tried to start a drinking game during the father-daughter dance, shouting, "Drink every time they spin." People tried to ignore him, but it was hard. The worst part came during the bouquet toss. Ryan decided it would be funny to push his way to the front and try to catch the bouquet. He knocked over several guests, causing a commotion and nearly ruining the moment. Security had to escort Ryan out, and the rest of the night was spent trying to salvage the celebration.